so for the next set of this video here, we're going to go into getting our character to have an aim offset animation blending for when you are aiming weapons. So as an example, I'll bring over what we're going to accomplish with this. For this, mind you, this is the other project that I'm basing a lot of this on. But right now we have it where the character will turn whenever we aim in the direction and will lock into his back. And now the next part we're going to do is we're going to get this guy to have his spine aim up and down as we look around with this character. So if we have the chance to, I'll try to get it where the camera will be able to adjust itself as we're looking up and down. So let's get started. So let me drag the main project over to the side and let's focus on what we're working on. So last time what we did with this character was we delved into his blueprint. So you can click on the character we're working on. We can come over to edit blueprint, we can open the blueprint editor to see where we had stopped last, and before what we had done was we had set up our aiming control for client and server, and we set up to our character to be orienting to the direction that he looks whenever the character aims, with the camera adjusting itself too to zoom in and change the field of view looking. So the next part is we need to go to jump into the meshes animation blueprint and begin making edits there. So I just dragged over my blueprint and just docked it as a tab at the top here. And what we can do is we can jump into our third-person BP. We can go over to our, I believe our character here. Looking for the mesh. It's not here, it's going to be set up somewhere else. Alright, so let me look around here for a quick second to find these animations. Well, if I can't find it here, I can just easily go back to the blueprint. I can find the third-person Animgraph, do a search, and it brings you right to where it was. So within the mannequin folder, I found my animation blueprint. So our animation blueprint is going to control everything that our character is doing as he's playing throughout the game. By default, this is a normal setup. It'll give you trying to get pawn order. It'll find if it's valid. If it is, then it's going to find the movement component and set it for if it's falling in the air and setting the speed. So as our character increases speed, the blend shape takes over and it goes into a blend between idle walk and run, and if they're falling, and jump segment. So what we're going to add on to this is we're going to add our casting here. So the first thing we'll do is let's make a little bit of room by dragging our animation refresh over, and let's widen this comment box up. Now we do know we need to get the pawn owner, whoever is controlling this character here. But what we need to do is we need to be able to find the variable that controls if the character is aiming or not, which we had already made one, which is player is ADS, is aim down sight. So from this we can actually drag off, and we can do cast to third person character, and from this we're going to feed in our update. So we're constantly understanding who or what's the state of our player character. Let's just bring it into is valid. And we could still use this if we want, but we're gonna have about two different things happen. We need to find out what's the state of our aiming, if we are aiming or we're not. But I'm just gonna delete this for now. And I'm going to drag off and do a sequence. So we're going to have two things happen. First, we need to continue our operation over to is in error. We can still keep the is valid if we want, but for this we're getting rid of it. And I'm going to come down and I need to find out a bool. So what we need to do is let's bring in a bool that's going to control what our character is doing. So let's make a new variable. By coming up here, I'm trying to make as much room as I can. Whoops. And let's add a new variable, and let's call this one aiming weapons. And what we'll do is we'll bring this down here, and then we'll set it. And we need something to drive this bool. And what we're going to do is we'll bring down, it will say get player is aim down sight. So this is the bool that we have replicated on our character blueprint, and let's drag our sequence down and let's connect it to our set, and let's comment this in case anybody else gets to read this. We hand this off to anyone else. We'll call this aiming weapons. This is essentially going to be driving our character's spine for our character when we break him in half. technically speaking. So the next part is we need to have something drive our bones. So what we want to do is we're going to need to grab a few things. We can do this by either dragging off from our player character up here. We could set a bool if you want to for the character, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this here, I copy these two, and I'm going to extend it further on in this open space over here at the end. So let me paste that, and it's a couple of different nodes that we're going to need to grab. Now we don't need to cast this, we're technically going to be casting, but we just need to get a different value off of one of the camera components, so we can convert it to a pure cast. And we can drag this down. We can look for our camera boom, and from our camera boom we need to find out what our camera's relative rotation is. So let's grab our relative R-E-A-L-I. Come on now, I can't spell. Let's find it. It's usually something at the bottom again. Relative rotation. And from this, I stand correct, I was looking at the wrong thing again. This will actually be used for later, so I'm going to keep this down here anyways. But from this we can actually grab off and we can use get base aim rotation. This kind of was doing what we were setting up here, but we're just using this for a general overall look for where our character is aiming at. So we know we need to grab the rotation off of this, and we need to do an angle for our spine. So we don't want our spine to exceed over at least 90 degrees or 75. So we can actually split this, and we can grab off our pitch, and we can clamp it to about whatever we're looking for in our angle. So the minimum I want is about 90 degrees, and then most I want the characters to move is about 90 upwards and positive. We can also grab this, we can make this into a rotation. And we want the rotation to actually talk to the skeleton at this point. So this is where it's going to get a little bit strange, but what I've found through trial and error, I'll save you the time on having to find out, is we're going to be influencing the yaw of our bones. So let's drag this return value, influence the yaw, alt and click, and we'll disable the roll. And what we want to do is we need to take this and we need to turn it into a variable. So let's disconnect this. So now we made a new rotation, we made a new variable. Let's go ahead and rename this. So we can click down here the new variable, maybe we push F2 to do a rename. And let's call this the aiming spine rotator. I probably spelled that wrong, but I'll just shorten it for rot for now. And we need to inverse this, so if we were to plug this in now, the value that would be being read from the pitch would be the other way around for when this happens. So let's leave this alone for now. We're going to come back to this in a minute, and we'll fix this. If you're one of those guys that likes to really be organizing with this, 4.10 they actually introduced an alignment, but for 4.9 they did not. It's a very nifty little tool, but we need something to influence this. So let's go, and we need to grab a branch. So when our character aims, he'll be doing one set of animations, and when he's not, it'll be doing another set. So if it's true, we need to get the aim spine rotation, what the influence is. What's going to drive this is going to be our aiming our weapons. So when it becomes true, the spine's going to be influenced. If not, then if we're not aiming weapons, then the spine's not going to do anything. Let's compile and save this. And once you compiled it, you see that we have an aiming spine rotation here at the bottom. Now let's go ahead and jump into our Animgraph. To find that, you can come down to your My Blueprint tab down here, double click on Animgraph, and it'll bring into your main state machines in Animgraph, so how this character's animations play with the player. So as you see, you have a default. So we have an idle walk run cycle blend shape down here, and this is a jump cycle. So if the character default jumps in the air, it just goes through a cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to break off from this default. And what I like to do is I like to cache a lot of my main poses. So like if I have a 4D blend shape, I have another state machine that takes care of that. So let's go ahead and drag this off the side. Let's drag this forward and let's do a CHC or CH, and like I say, new save cache pose. Let's connect this. Let's rename our pose to base movement. And we can also come over here and let's go base movement, use cache pose base movement. Basically, all this is doing is it's just reading this, except you can take this and duplicate it everywhere. Instead of having a whole bunch of these copies everywhere, instead you're just saying this is what I want this to do, just make a copy of all these motions. So from that, we want to begin breaking this character up. So the first thing we'll do is we need a switch to happen. So what we can do is we can actually do a type in bool, blend poses by bool, and what this will do is we can do a flip-flop statement technically. So we don't really need to mess with the alpha blending so much, but we need to have this character, if he's not aiming, we'll use the base motion movements. Let's plug that right into the results. But if our character is aiming, we need to do a breakup of the character's body. So in order to accomplish that, we can use something called layer blend per bone. So we drag this off, we can do blend per bone. It'll come up with the layer blend per bone. That's what we want. We don't really need to be messing with the alpha for this, so we can turn that off by unchecking the runtime. And from this, we can have our base pose be the base movement. So we can take this, we can't drag off and split it up like we can with notes. But again, that's what's nice about using cache poses. We can just copy it, paste it, and that's going to be our base pose that's going to be driving our character movement. Now for the upper part of the body, we need a bone in which this starts to manipulate from. So from our layer setup, we can input where exactly what bone gets influenced in this character. So if you come down to layer setup, we just drop these arrows here. We're going to add another branch, and we need a bone name, and our main bone point that we want to start influencing from for this layer blend is our spine 01. If you need to find out where exactly the bone is on your character, you can come up to the tab up here to skeleton, and you can find in his graph what bones are where and what's doing what. So I know for this is going to be spine bone 1 at the bottom. That's going to influence the upper part of his body. So from this, we now we need something to drive our spine bones for when we're aiming. So we also need an animation that's going to allow this guy to aim his weapon whenever we are aiming weapons. So since we have an animation starter pack, I believe we can right click and find something with like idle rifle. Okay, so that's not in there. Let's go into our map and let's find it. So we have an animation starter pack. In search, we can type in idle rifle aim. Nope, that wasn't it. It's called Iron Sight. And this is the one that we're going to want to be using, which is the idle rifle iron sight. It's just a standard, it's just a straightforward aiming as he is. There will be a little bit of a strange situation with this guy when he's aiming. He's going to look around a bit, but there's a fix for that, and I'll probably do that on a different video. For now, let's just get this guy set up. So this is the animation we want to use. So since we now know where it is, close down this animation viewer. I'm just going to drag off the tab here, and I'm going to see if I can drag this animation directly in from the content browser, and it won't because the skeletons are not compatible. What we can do is we can do a copy for this guy if we want. So we can do retargeting, or we can find a skeleton. For this, what it uses, let's go with the anim pack again. Let's go back up to rifle. Alright. See what options we can use for this. Now, I know I can retarget this thing. So let's just retarget it for the other skeletons. These are technically two different skeletons using this, but not so much. I mean, they're the same setup, but that's how the Unreal's reading it. So we can go to retarget animation assets. Let's duplicate, and we have no skeletons to choose from. So I'm going to go over a little bit of retargeting here to get this animation over to the other skeleton, and we should be able to continue working from there. So first thing we need to do is let's find this guy's skeleton. So I know that the mesh, you can find the skeleton by clicking there on the magnifying glass to find the content browser. Let's double click our skeleton, and we need to get this character set up so into the library for retargeting. So in the skeleton tab, we don't need to see the animation on him, we just need him to be in his bind pose, because we have to have our poses as close as possible to get the better retargeting done. So let's click on reference pose, and it'll go to his bind pose in which the skeleton or the mesh was bound to the skeleton. And next we can go to retarget manager. This will bring up a window for adding skeletons to your retargeter so other skeletons can use animations by other characters. We can add a new retarget source, which will be our skeleton we're using here. We can rename this to whatever we want in our library. And I'm going to leave it as is for now. Our base rig is a humanoid rig, and if you have a very different rig with different names, you might have to match up the names if you have to. It's pretty easy little setup. If it has more, the bones are different places or different names and you can't find on here, go to show advanced, and it'll give you a little bit more options such as retargeting like IK, FK, different foot bones, and even fingers. But for now, our base works. So let's save out this pose, and now our character should be good to go within that library. Now let's jump over to the other character in the anim pack, and let's do the same thing with him. So if we double click on this guy and go to his skeleton, let's go to his reference pose, the retarget manager, add a new retarget. It will say two things. We're going to end up reading this directory name to find out which skeleton we're working with. Let's go ahead and do the same thing we did with the other guy. Let's save out his pose, and now both our characters should be in the animation retargeting library. So again, let's find that rifle idle iron sights. Let's right click on that and let's go to retarget animation assets, duplicate for another skeleton. Now here's the other skeleton we have. Now we know this is the one that we're working with because it says game mannequin character SK mannequin. That's the one that we're using in the content browser that lies down here. This is the one that we're working with in the editor. So we click on that. This should retarget just fine. These skeletons are 100% like matching each other. And if we do select, now our animation should now be retargeted for this character to be using it. If we move over to that character's file, there's our new animation. Let's jump back into this character's anim blueprint. So now if we go over to the graph, we should be able to find in our asset browser a new animation called idle rifle iron sight. Okay, so that was just a very quick rundown of the retargeting manager. I can do another video down the road that shows more in depth about that, but the retargeting manager is a huge lifesaver when it comes to time and getting animations for other characters. You can retarget entire animation blueprints for other characters too, and it saves so much time if you ever have to do that in projects. Okay, so back to this guy. So now we have an animation to base our aiming off of. We need to have something manipulate the bone. So we have already set up a variable for aiming our spine rotation. We can bring that in, do a get, and we can do a transform, modify bone, and this is going to be asking you to specify a bone that you want to manipulate. We're going to be doing this for 3 different bones because we want a good blending between all 3 of these instead of a hard one bone manipulation. Now for these bones we don't need to translate, we don't need scale.
And what we can do to turn those off is we can again just hit the pin and we can turn off those pins so we're not accidentally selecting something we don't need. So rotation is where we need to focus right now. So in rotation, we want to add to existing, and we want to change the bone space. Let's plug in our rotation. And for our alpha, we want an even blend between our three of our bones. So we'll do about a 0.3. So if you have 3 bones that you're manipulating at 0.3, it should come up to a total of 0.9. So you're not doing 100%, you're doing about 90% manipulation on his back. So let's do 0.3. And for this, let's just duplicate this twice. Now for each one of these, we're going to come in and let's find the bone that we want to manipulate. So for this first one here, I know that I want to change the spine. So if I come up to bone to modify, it'll find the character you're working with. All of his skeletal bones will show up in the list for you to choose from. So the top one, let's do spine 3. This one here, the second one down, we'll do spine 2. And the bottom will do the lower part of his body that has the most influence over the others of spine 1. Again, let's plug in our aiming spine rotation to influence how much these manipulate each other. And when we plug this in, this is a main animation for the entire character. Once we drag this into here, it'll do a convert to a local space. So now it's only doing something within the character, not the entire character itself. This is what you would use for montages or reloading animations when characters move. So let's drag these down to a chain, and let's plug this into our layer blend per bone. So component to local. Now we're almost done. We have one more thing we got to do that's going to drive our blend poses. So let's find a bool. We have one. It's aiming weapons. Let's bring that up. We'll do a get, and now it should be good to go. And we can see if this actually works our setup here. So by saving it, so right now our character is not aiming. Once this character aims, by checking this bool here, he should go into an aiming pose, and that he is. Now everything snaps really quickly, there's no blending between it, it's very fast. So now if we change our aiming spine rotation, our pitch is going to go to a roll. So for this character, since we set it up to manipulate yaw, the yaw should be able to get this guy to go up and down. Now he looks like he's going left to right, and that's not due to how we set this up. That's actually due to the way the animation was done. The spine bones are actually blending in like a 15-degree limit on each other. But usually when I animate aiming animations, I try to keep the spine bones facing almost straight forward. That big glare on the ground there. But based on the XYZ, I try to keep all 3 of the bones facing down the Y, so it'll give like a really good crisp, like 100% forward blend when you're aiming weapons, so third-person shooter. Down the road, I'll definitely be showing how to do this. So now, if we do a pitch, it's still going to be doing that, but this is why we needed to put it to the yaw. Seems kind of strange, but this is one way of workaround I found for it. So let's save this. And cool thing is too is if we go back to the Animgraph and we do yes we're aiming, we can aim up and down. Let's aim up a little bit, and on top of that our characters should be split in half because now he's totally running. So let's go ahead and we'll compile, save it one more time, and let's test this out by going into our viewport. I'll maximize this and hit Alt-P to play. So now when I'm looking around, I'm running, and when I right click, he should now be aiming. And he is moving in the opposite direction. So remember that one thing that we missed before on the event graph? Let's go ahead and add that invert. So if we come back to our animation blueprint and our event graph, we need one more thing to between this. Since we know our rotation's influencing it for where we're looking, we need something to invert this. Well, it's nice that they already have something built in for that. We can type in invert rotator, and this will invert our aiming spacing. So if we're looking up, he'll look up. If we're looking down, he'll look down, instead of doing the opposite of what he was doing before. So I'm going to comment this, and let's comment that to one more time. spine rotation. I'm trying not to do capitals and everything. For aiming weapons. Pile and save. Let's try it out one more time. So now for aiming, he should look up, and then we look down. So it's also giving a nice little blend between all three spine bones. If you wanted to test this on that networking side of things that we set up, we can actually come down to our example map here, and I'm going to go to drop down to play. Let's push this up to 2 players. And now when we play it, I think both these windows are going to be very large. We'll do what we can to see whatever possible. Actually, let's break both these windows off. Let's go to new editor window. So now we have 2 floating windows. So we have our client, we have our server. Let's bring our server over here. And we have our client. So let's find our server. So there's our server. And there's really not a lot of room to look. So if we're aiming though, our client should see both our server over here should be aiming and looking up and down. I apologize for it cutting out the screen. We'll adjust this in another video for getting smaller windows and better testing. And on top of that, now that we're on our client side, let's move our client over. If we're aiming, now our client can, or our server can see what the client's doing. Cool. So we'll stop the video there, and then next time we'll look into getting a little bit more correction on some of the aiming, and we'll actually do a cool little head manipulation on the characters, such as what I was showing in the first video, where if you're looking around, the player's head will look in different directions. If you've figured out how to modify the spine bones at this point, it's almost the same exact process as doing this with the head. Just a little bit more interpolation, but it'll be fun to figure out. Alright, so I'll stop the video there, and then I'll see you guys on the next one.